Have you ever been in group settings where, the other few people are having their own conversations and in their own world, and you're kind of seated between them or away from them as they're having their conversations, and you can tell that it's very hard to intrude and you really don't want to interrupt them because they seem to have such a nice connection, and you don't want to kind of break the status quo, and you don't want them to feel irritated by you or bothered by you. So you kind of just sit there alone outside of their conversations, not knowing what to do. You just sit there with a blank expression. You don't want to pull out your phone because that's also disrespectful, and you still want to be kind of included in the conversation, and you don't want people to look at you and wonder why you're just seated out of the conversation, right? It's a very specific thing, but everybody fucking struggles with it. So today I'm going to talk about what you can do in that situation, how you can see it, how you can process it. So here we go. I just came back from a workout, right? And me and my boys, we were seated in this rounded table to have lunch together. And I was talking to one guy, and this group of guys were talking to each other, and there was one of my friends seated across from me. It was hard for me to include him into my own conversation because he's completely on the other side of the table. But he was just seated there. He didn't know how to join the other people's conversation. He would glance over for a while, and then he would look back into his own things, check his phone for a little bit, fiddle with his hands for a little bit. He didn't know how to sit, where to look, what to say. He didn't want to intrude into any conversation, so he just kind of sat there blankly. And I know exactly how that feels. I've been in that situation many times. And if in that situation you are feeling uncomfortable, everyone else can see it, which is annoying as fuck. So what we have to do is find a way to not feel uncomfortable in that situation, and also find a way to get ourselves back in the conversation and be involved with the people around us. And it's not something that you can have 100% success rate in, because not everyone you're out with is perfectly compatible with you, and there will always be some periods of time where you are not in a conversation and you're just kind of seated there alone in a group. That's always going to happen. But what we can do, what is under our control, is we can join back whenever we like, and we can also become more comfortable in that situation. One of the biggest trigger for why we are uncomfortable in that situation is because we secretly or subconsciously, or we do know actually, that we want to join the conversation, that we want to be involved, and we don't want other people to see us just seated there alone. Then because we are fighting with that desire versus the fear of intruding into somebody's conversation and interrupting them and being the object of, irritants, we start to second guess everything we want to do. And because of that, we sit there very awkwardly, trying to figure out what to do, what is right, calculate what the perfect way to join the conversation is. And that just creates this really uncomfortable, awkward feeling because you are resisting your desires, and everybody can see you kind of try to control yourself. This still happens to me. Yesterday, I was seated at a ramen stall with a bunch of my friends. There were like 4 girls seated here along this stretch, and there was me, 1 girl, and 1 guy in this other stretch. And because these 2 people were speaking and these 4 people were speaking, I was just seated in the middle, and I didn't know who to speak to and who I even wanted to speak to. And the self-evaluation started getting to me like, wait, how do I look like right now if I'm just sitting here in between them? I look like I have no friends. I look like nobody likes me. But that's just not true at all, because, I know all these people and they are my friends. It's just that in that moment, I wasn't having a wonderful conversation with anyone, and I felt kind of ostracized a little bit. But that is just because of that self-consciousness and things like that. But I understood it, and I just kind of, Vernon, relax on that weird feeling. Let's just have the conversations we want to have and, relax a little bit. Let's just have fun. So I started to autism max. I started to point out random things, and I ended up having a really nice conversation with the girl seated next to me as we both started to mash up the sesame seeds in the bowl. When you're in a ramen store, they give you these sesame seeds inside a mortar and pestle. They kind of crush, and then you put it into your food for more flavor. So as I became more relaxed myself, I was able to focus on the opportunities that were actually available to me in that moment. And I ended up having a really nice, almost autistic conversation with the girl next to me, because as we both did stupid things, we also talked about our aspirations, our goals, and our futures. And it became a meaningful conversation while we're doing autistic things. So the first thing you want to focus on is to get into a relaxed state. If you feel like you have to restrict your movement or perform a certain way while you're in conversation, then you're going to feel even more afraid to take the next step, or to act on your desires, or to start conversation, or to join in conversation, because you're going to be less relaxed and you're going to be more calculative about what you should and should not do. So The first thing I would recommend you to do, especially if you're a little bit more socially inept and you're a little bit more socially anxious, something that will really, really help you is to retard max. Is to allow yourself to be comfortable and weird. And at first, this could come off as incredibly unnatural, and honestly, some people would think you're weird, if I'm being honest, but you have to take that risk. Right? We're not afraid of that shit here. If you're able to feel comfortable in a conversation, then it's not going to be awkward. So you want to kind of expand your space of comfortability by doing more things that are a little bit more expressive and kind of feel comfortable in the environment you're in by moving things around. You know, what I like to do is I like to either take up a lot of space with some big movement so I feel more comfortable in the area around me, or I like to say some weird shit out loud, or I like to turn to the other person and maybe play with their belongings. This sounds so stupid, but I promise you, it actually can work. And this is just like a random tactic, but the principle behind this is you want to feel more comfortable in taking action and understanding that even if we're kind of weird, even if we do things that are considered to be stupid, it doesn't really mean anything because we honestly want to do those things. And that actually helps us get more comfortable in our social environment. And as you build up this momentum of becoming more comfortable, then you're more able to turn to the person next to you who's in conversation right now and join their conversation. You're more comfortable, you're more confident, you feel more relaxed in your environment, and you stop having this self-consciousness, this self-evaluation. Now you can relax in the moment, turn to the person next to you and go, hey, what are you guys talking about? And then they will fill you in on it. And this could be really, really difficult at first. I completely get that. I remember in the past, I was so afraid to interrupt because I just didn't want to be irritating and I didn't want them to hate me or dislike me for trying to join in a conversation that I wasn't invited into, because I also hear a lot of people who like to complain that people join in conversations uninvited, and I understand that, to some people it could be very irritating for when certain people join their conversations, and I don't want to be that person. So I will always withdraw myself, I will always be a little bit more reserved and make sure I don't overstep my boundaries. But you have to think of yourself highly to the point where you joining the conversation is an addition, not a disruption. Do you get what I mean? You have to see your presence as valuable, as entertaining enough, as a raw, vulnerable attempt at connecting with other people that other people would appreciate. And honestly, it's difficult to delude yourself, to use tactics and principles to kind of fall into this state where you genuinely value your own presence enough to where you think that everywhere you go, everything you add to conversations is good and useful and valuable. Very, very difficult to delude yourself into that. So what you need to do right now is focus on building social proof. Focus on getting external validation for your addition to the conversation. And that sounds bad. External validation always sounds bad. But it is useful because we understand that what other people value is important, since we want to make more relationships, since we care about what other people think. Which is not a terrible thing. It's only a terrible thing if you start to care about what other people think to the point where you start to over-calculate and start to feel like you have to perform and be someone else to be more attractive. That's where it becomes terrible. But right now, we are leveraging external validation to build our social proof so that we become more confident in social environments. Then once we realize and we let ourselves accept and really learn that our presence is valuable, because 95% of people are welcoming of it, are receptive of it, then we are more able to be honest with the things we want, be honest with the interest we show, and because of that, we're able to take more risk. So what you need to do, very simple, you need more social practice. You need to put yourself in almost like a committed social experience every single week, ideally every day if you want to make it really, really overpowering progress. But you want to meet people more often. You want to be more mindful when these situations come about where you start to feel anxious, start to feel awkward, and you don't know what to do. The more situations of that you face, and the more you think about it and deliberately try to implement new things that could help you get out of those situations, the faster you will grow. Now, you want to make sure that your mental health is in check as well. Because if we just throw ourselves into these things, into these social situations without focusing on our mental health, that creates a very unproductive environment where we are just using the other people for company and validation, and we have nothing going on in our own lives. So we have to make sure that we are developing our competence, heading towards our goals, while working on our mental health and mental capacity, because we want to be someone who's holistically good at everything, and because we want to deliberately improve. It takes some mental capacity. We can't be like everyone else where we just, mindlessly walk into the right choices. Because me and you, we're not like that. We need to make deliberate choices. We are very conscientious, we're very self-aware, we're very introspective. So we do need the mental health. We do need mental health habits. We do need to work on our mental capacity. And it's not a bad thing because we choose to take it deliberately rather than just mindlessly, put ourselves out there and stay the same all the time. We are going to make progress while other people are going to stay stagnant. So don't worry too much about that. Put in deliberate effort. Speak to more people and practice this skill of handling awkward moments where you feel like you're ostracized and things like that. One tactic that is quite effective when you feel like you are left out is to just join the conversation by being extra attentive to the person who is speaking currently. So if there's two people speaking next to you and you don't want to interrupt, you don't have to wait until they pause for you to turn over and start a conversation with them. As they are speaking, you can easily just turn over to them and then you look into the eyes of the person who's speaking and attentively listen to what he has to say, and then add your own opinion if the timing is appropriate. And of course, sometimes people are terrible at including other people, but you don't necessarily have to take it personally. 90% of the time, they will rather you join in than not. And you have to take that risk if that is what you genuinely want. If you want to join that conversation, be honest with yourself and try to. No one's going to be patient and pat you on the head like a good boy and invite you in openly. When you are not honest with what you want and you are afraid to go after what you want, that's when you become a true burden. People would rather you be honest with what you want and show interest, even if sometimes you will be intruding or interrupting. It is way more disturbing and annoying for some guy to think so lowly of himself that he just excludes himself from everything and pride himself on being the lone wolf. So try to include yourself if you goddamn want to. Turn to them and try to attentively listen until you are included or you have a perfect chance to add an opinion. And sometimes they won't even make eye contact with you. Sometimes, of course, sure, it's because they don't want to include you. But 80% of the time, that's not the case. They will love for you to join. They just don't want it to be too deliberate because they don't want it to turn into an awkward moment where they just start staring at you who is not even in a conversation technically. So don't take it personally. Think of how you can join. Most people are going to be terrible at including other people. So you have to be the one to take up that responsibility and join if you then want to. Don't be a fucking wuss. But if they are good at that, then they would make eye contact with you, ask you what you think because they see that you're listening attentively now. Now with all these principles and building up your mental capacity and these tactics, this kind of social awareness skills that you can kind of use in midst of when awkward situations are happening. With these skills, you're going to be fine 90% of the time. However, if you ever feel like you are being deliberately left out, like these people create group chats without you, like these people laugh at you way more than they laugh at anyone else in the group, like these people invite you out just to leave you on the sidelines all the time. If you ever feel like you are deliberately being left out, there is no saving that shit. Even if you become someone incredibly competent and be able to provide so much fucking value, they're not going to be good friends. They're going to be superficial trash cans that you never wanted to be around anyway, other than because you lack options. So if you're ever being deliberately left out, and a small part of you can feel it, you either bring it up to them and say, "Are you guys leaving me out?" And if they start laughing at you for thinking that way, get out of there. Or if you think it's already a lost cause and you're too afraid to have that conversation and bring it up because you know that they'll just make fun of you even more, just leave. Just never speak to them ever again. Every time they ask you out, say you're busy. Completely extract yourself. There is no point continuing a relationship that is that one-sided. It is disgusting. It is way beneath you. If you even want to continue a relationship like that, there's fundamentally something wrong with you. You have terrible mental health, you have terrible self-worth and self-esteem, and you need to work on yourself an extra amount. Never tolerate being deliberately left out. It is the gayest shit ever. You need to deliberately improve yourself to a point where you never have to feel this kind of nonsense again. You need so much options that these people come crawling back to you instead. Being deliberately left out is one of those things that hurt me so so badly. And it's something so ingrained in my soul, something that I'm so pissed off at. If you're going to invite someone out just to deliberately leave them out, you are a horrible human being. If anybody does that to you, they're either trying to use you for something, or they literally just want you there as entertainment. They want you as the jester for everybody to kind of poke at and laugh at. But have some self-worth, have some dignity, and get the fuck out of there. Never speak to them ever again. And of course I say like they are the horrible people here, but you are someone who lacks value, you are someone who lacks competence. If someone is not honest with you, they don't point out your flaws and they're not giving you any advice, or they don't want you to get any better, and you're being deliberately left out and played with, you need to get out of there as soon as possible. You need to grab yourself by the balls, use whatever ounce of testosterone you have left to stand up for yourself, and just leave. It is pathetic to have so little options that you have to stay with people who don't even value you. And you need to really sit with yourself, and you need to really get out of this stupid situation. But being deliberately left out versus being left out because people don't have the skill to know how to include you, or they expect you to include yourself because they respect you, or they almost feel inferior to you. These are completely different things. Always think of your presence as something that's valuable. Always try to include yourself if you do want to. And don't just sit there and take it and think of yourself as a burden, or someone who's interruptive, or someone who's disruptive to the status quo and the group's relationship. Once you start to carry yourself in that fearful way, you become incredibly irritating. The more adamant you are, the more willing you are to show your interest, and the more secure you are in your own skin, the more fun you'll be to be around. Be willing to invite yourself, be willing to add yourself into the conversation. By taking that risk, you have so much more opportunity to make wonderful relationships. And if you ever feel like you're being deliberately left out, just get out of there. Alright? Have a little bit of respect for yourself and disappear. Just adios. Really just adios. And if you are in that situation, it probably means you have so little respect for yourself. It probably means you genuinely lack value right now. And that's okay, because you can build it up. But you need to get away from those people who are keeping you this weak, pathetic little wuss. The longer you spend around those people, the worse you'll get, the more disgusting you'll be. Get out of there. Don't hang with people who deliberately leave you out. Go and build up your competence. Go and improve your options by speaking to more people as you get more competent, and you're going to find a way better group of friends who actually support and care about you. Get to work, include yourself, improve your mental capacity. Don't need to feel so uncomfortable in conversations. At the end of the day, enjoy yourself. Just learn to have fun around whoever the hell you're with. Learn to have fun in your own mind. Learn to be relaxed in whatever social situation you're in. Have that non-neediness. Play with your environment. Play with people. This is hilariously fun. Life is just fun. Don't have to think of those social situations like you're being evaluated, like you have to calculatively be the most attractive person there. Focus on having fun, no matter where you're at, no matter who you're with. When you're focused on having fun, you're actually more honest, more transparent, more willing to show interest, and from there, just by having fun, you can follow these basic principles that will get you so many more relationships, make you so many more friends, make you so much more attractive, just by letting go and having fun, no matter where you're with. As long as you're enjoying yourself genuinely and you're enjoying the other person's company without being overly self-conscious and overly calculative of what you're doing, that's where you start to really have those connections you want. That's where you start to have those meaningful conversations. That's where you start to build the genuine relationships you've always desired. You got this. I love you. It's a better work.